Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Today's episode is going to be a short interview for a short story. We're back with Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat, a Bayonet book anthology, volume 11. We have Kenneth Givens, and I don't know why I wrote Kevin on that, because you were definitely not Kevin. I'm pretty sure that's not what your mama named you.
Nope, but I get it all the time.
I mean, at least it's not Cartman, right? Or Kenny.
That's fair. I'm still alive and kicking.
That's right. But we've got Kenneth E Givens. The E is important when you want to look him up for publishing. Kenneth E Givens II. And so can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, JR. As you said, I'm Kenneth E Givens II. I am a project manager by trade and career path. But anytime that I have a little bit of free time on the side, I like to write as much as I can and read as much as I can. So I spend a lot of my time in my library and at my desk at home. And I am coming here today to talk about my short story, The Fellowship of the Unlikely.
Not freaking standing. So first off, I understand this is your first published anthology. Have you, or published anything, have you written and submitted elsewhere, or was this your first submission too?
This was actually my first submission, so I submitted two things on the same day. This one got picked up. The other one did not. Unfortunately, it was about vampires and werewolves, but this one did get picked up. And this is.
Did you send the other one to this anthology as well, or was that for a different open call?
It was for a different open call.
Okay. Well, the good news is you can always re-edit them and submit them elsewhere. You can give them away for free in your newsletter when you set those up. You can make your own anthology around it, because nothing's ever wasted if you're frugal with your words. But so what got you started with the writing? A lot of people like to read. Not as many make the leap to, I want to write the things myself.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in libraries growing up as a kid. So my mom worked night shift and she was a single mother. So a lot of times after school, while I was waiting to get picked up, I would go next door to the county library and just, soak up as much information as I could. And then I started writing probably in 4th or 5th grade. When I was in 6th grade, I won the Young Georgia Authors Award for that year. And, ever since then, it was for a short story that my teacher had recommended that I submit. It was actually a class assignment. It was about vampires and werewolves. And ever since then, I love to write. I'm working currently on hopefully will be my debut novel. It's a book 1 in a 9-book series, very, very large books as well. I'm like halfway through draft number 1 and I'm 170 something pages into it. But I've been planning that I guess series of trilogies for about 15 years now, and I've been rewriting them, but I finally got a little bit further in it this time than I have in years past. So I'm looking forward to hopefully finishing that up here in the spring.
Nice. So if people get addicted to your books and they have to wait while you write them, it's really your mother's fault.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So tell her we said that. It's all her fault.
I will share that. I'm sure she will pass the blame back on me.
Well, no, when you sign her copy, because you've bought author copy, so when you sign one for her, right, this is all your fault. That could be your signing line, your tagline.
There you go.
All right, and since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we can't let you escape without the religion question. So, Aragon, Reign of Fire or Damsel?
Reign of Fire. I didn't actually read the Aragon series, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. But I think Reign of Fire was probably the first movie I watched as a kid that had dragons in it. And from that point on, I was kind of stuck in the fantasy realm. I couldn't get out of it.
Okay. All right. Because we are polytheistic, we've got the last Dragon Slayer, Dragonheart, or the Dragons of Camelot.
We'll go with Dragonheart. Having listened to a couple of episodes already, I know that one's been a popular pick, but definitely the story is a different story than I think anyone's ever written about dragons, and how they kind of bamboozled the people as they went from town to town. So I just really enjoyed that story.
Absolutely. That is a interesting plot point, but you can never really go wrong when you are talking Sean Connery as an actor. I mean,
Right.
I've yet to not enjoy even the B movies that he did were all freaking phenomenal.
Yeah, he's a special, or I guess was a special talent.
Yeah. And he took it. He treated it like a job. So some of the B movies that other actors might not have been willing to come on and do, like some of the whatever, as long as they paid him, he did it. And they did some interviews with him while he was still alive and kicking. And one of the things he said was, "This is a job, and if they're going to pay me and I've got the time for it, why not?"
Right.
Which I respect the work ethic, the hustle.
100%.
All right, and because we can't do it without threes, because it's a powerful number, I'm told. Knights of the Damned, Wyvern or Dragon Fury?
So I haven't actually seen these three, but I did look them up, and I know out of those three, Knights of the Dam sounded like something that I definitely want to watch. It's actually I've queued it up on my TV to watch sometime this weekend, but I haven't actually seen any of those yet.
Okay, so you got some homework out of the episode. Huh.
Yep.
All right, and in case you missed it, dear listener, all of the unifying themes have been dragons, because we're here to talk about Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat. Obviously, the movie trailer voice guy has his job for one more day, but I'm going to give it another effort. Give it that old college try. Deep breaths. Prepare for a battle as see what I mean? Dude's got job security today. Prepare for a fierce battle as you step into a world where dragons clash with courage and ferocity. In these 17 gripping tales, heroes rise and fall, facing fire-breathing foes in epic confrontations. Each story unravels unique conflicts, from desperate towns defending their homes to warriors seeking vengeance. Meet the brave and the foolhardy, each with their own motives. Discover the price of power and the cost of betrayal. Will they conquer the flames, or will they be consumed? Join the fight. The dragons await, and the stakes are deadly. All right. With that, Kenneth, what is your story titled? I know you just said earlier, but in case they didn't catch it.
Yeah, it's The Fellowship of the Unlikely.
Were you a little bit nervous picking that one as close as it flies to the sun? That is,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very, very nervous. I was telling you before we got on here that when I wrote that at the top of the screen before I started writing, it was kind of like a placeholder. And then when I went to go hit submit, I was like, I really like it. It kind of sums up the story, in my opinion, very well. So I stuck with it.
Not a bad choice. I mean, it's bold. It catches your attention.
For sure.
All right. Well, we did promise a quick episode, dear listener, for a short story. So what is the synopsis of The Fellowship of the Unlikely?
Yeah, so it starts off with a researcher from a university. Story's kind of set in, it's in a different world, but it's kind of medieval times-esque. Definitely like sword and sorcery type deal. It starts off with a researcher who has been sent by the university to find their, prized professor. This professor went off on a journey to find what he believed was the last dragon. Dragons in this world have been, for lack of a better term, extinct for quite some time. But a lot of folks don't even think they ever existed. They think they're just myths because they've been gone for so long. So this professor has left and has not returned. So the story kind of kicks off with this researcher who's never been outside of the city where the university's at. Now he's had to travel by boat, across the world practically. And with some of the funds that the university has given him, he's tried to assemble, a party of folks that can help him find this professor. So he's kind of out of his element, has no idea what to expect. And he's assembled this team of kind of ragtag folks. There's a thief who has no morals and is not bashful in any way, shape, or form. There's a mercenary who really isn't much for words, prefers to use his sword to talk for him. And then there's the tropey old wizard, but he lacks a lot of wisdom where most old wizards have wisdom. And he honestly doesn't have much magic either. So this ragtag group is kind of going on this journey together.
So basically a story of the JV team trying to compete at the varsity level.
Right. Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it.
What was the inspiration for the short story?
So I had been reading, and my wife had been reading, several of the cozy fantasy stories of late.
Okay.
And the call to action for the open call here was more of like the kind of scary, horror driven dragon. And I felt like cozy has its place, and I'm a fan of it. But I wanted to get back to like the old school, almost like Dungeons and Dragons campaign where you have a party and you really don't know if you're going to make it out the other side, and you're kind of on the edge of your seat while you're reading through the story to see if the folks that the characters that you follow, and if they're going to make it.
Yeah, we were looking more for the dragon St. George had to fight versus the Pete's dragon. It's because with all of the dragon shifter romance stuff, we've kind of gotten away, not culturally, but we've gotten away from in the literary world, the dragon as the, ferocious monster. And those things come and go in waves, but
right.
I figured we'd go back to them as ferocious opponent, because why not?
Yeah, I agree.
So, do you think you're going to come back and write in this larger universe, or are you done with it after this and you're going to move on to something else?
That's a great question. So I'll say the trilogy of trilogies I was talking about earlier is actually set in the same world about 400 years after this short story. So one of the characters in the story that you meet, I won't give away any spoilers, but they end up being around 400 years in the future when my first trilogy kicks off. So same world, some of the same cities and places, but you'll see that they're much different in the future, right? 400 years later, some of those cities that may have been big and have a lot of commerce are now kind of empty and stuff like that. So same world for sure, and I'm very excited to be able to write even a short story in that world.
Okay, so what can you tell us about the main character?
So the main character here in the short story, his name's Victor, and he's kind of a funny play on a character that has all this knowledge but has zero common sense. So he kind of shows up in this tavern where there's a lot of unruly folks, and he's kind of flashing around his bag of gold because he's used to being in a place where you're not going to get robbed, and he doesn't really understand what the law of the land and the streets is. So he's just very confused, and he's kind of more or less being dragged along by this group that he's hired because they've lived in this world, and he is kind of a fish out of water. So you get to kind of learn about how this world interacts with this character, and you kind of get to learn with him along the way.
Okay. Is this story, I mean, it's the same universe. Do you think it's going to become almost something out of legend or lore for the later series, 400 years later?
Yeah, it is. So, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but what they end up finding on their journey becomes a legend of lore in the series I'm writing right now. So, a lot of times, I don't want to say the way I give background stories, but the way I give some background is the main character in my trilogy. He's a general, so he'll sit down at the fire with his men at the end of each evening. And a lot of times the folks will tell stories, and a lot of it's legends and myths and stuff like that. And actually, at one of the fires, you get a portion of this story at that fireside kind of chat. So I've already kind of intertwined those things already.
And then you could assemble all those stories as short stories and have a collection of the legends and lore from the world too.
Absolutely,
and get plenty of anthology submissions out of it as well. Smart thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping for the anthology submissions for sure.
Okay. So how much of, since this is one of your first published things, how much of the main character was a self-insert from your gaming days? Since you mentioned it, you wanted to go back to the D&D stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of a spot on from the first time I played D&D. So I got into D&D kind of late in life. And my dungeon master was awesome. He kind of held our hands as we went. The first campaign I joined, it was everyone in the group's first campaign. So we were all kind of fumbling our way through it. One of the other characters in this party, the mercenary character, was actually a character one of my friends played in a later campaign that we ended up running with the same group. So I definitely played on a lot of at least the characters and traits from some of those D&D campaigns that I had participated in back when I was in college. So it's kind of fun to re-experience those characters. I had a little notebook with their character sheets from 10 years ago that were yellowing in the books. So I was excited to be able to thumb those back out, and I was glad that I kept them all those years later.
Useful. And then somebody else did all the fleshing out of the backstory for you, so you've got fully rounded peoples.
Right. And I think someone gave the recommendation one time to me that if you're having struggles with a character that you're writing, just kind of sit down and have like a conversation with them on the page, just you and that character back and forth. And what was nice about these characters that I had already, almost lived an experience with them for, 10 or 12 hour campaign with these people. So they almost felt real already when I started writing them.
Okay. So what subgenre would you place your story? Obviously it's dragons because the anthology was themed as such, but other than that, what kind of subgenre, if you were going to pick, best fit your story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think sword and sorcery is probably the closest. I think there's a kind of a play on the party dynamic. So I know that's kind of I don't know what you call it. I know in gaming it's like couch co-op type deal, and in video game I don't know what you call that in stories, but I definitely don't feel like you get as many stories where you have an assembled party as you used to. So that's kind of what I was trying to get back to.
Okay. What is it? What is it about that appeals to you that you wanted to go back there?
That's a good question. I think primarily it was the comfort, right? When I was growing up, the first fantasy story I ever read, and I probably shouldn't have read it when I was in third grade, but I read The Lord of the Rings, and there's big swaths of that book where you have the fellowship, right? But they've been split up into smaller groups, and the group dynamic plays on itself so well, and I really missed that, right? It felt like comfort when I was reading it, even though the story itself isn't a cozy fantasy. I felt more comfortable being in a kind of a situation with characters that felt familiar.
Okay, that makes sense. So we did promise you, dear listener, a short interview for a short story. So we've got a fun one for the road. But would you live in this world if you could?
I believe I would. I know I'd be sacrificing a whole lot, right? I think the number one thing is AC and indoor plumbing, but I've been working on building this world for the better part of 10 or 15 years. So I think it would be exciting. I don't have kids yet. I am married, but I don't have kids. So I feel like it'd be a fun time to jump in that world. I definitely would need some sort of plot armor though, for sure, because this world's not an easy place to get along. It's a pretty dangerous place,
But could you convince your wife to go with you? That's the question.
I don't think I ever could convince her to go with me, for sure. She doesn't even like to go camping. She's definitely an indoor person for sure.
Okay, that's fair. All right. This is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, and they really do matter. And when it comes more specifically to reviewing for anthologies, it really does help if there's one story that stood out to you to go ahead and mention that in your review. And the authors that wrote those stories, they will see them, and they will love you forever. So you will have like eternal devotion from the author whose story you just wrote about. Because most of the time, the reviews of anthologies are as generic as the descriptions, because it is a collection of stories. So if you take the time to single a few out, I'm telling you, man, they're going to love you for it. But with that said, Kenneth, how can we find you on the wild interwebs for now?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, my handle is at kgmustache32. And then on my website is www.kennethgivensii.com.
Okay. And we will link to all of that in the show notes. And we've walked him through in the pre-show how to set up his KDP account, so he'll be able to get a Amazon page for author page soon. Although, when I say soon, we're at the discretion of the Bezos gods, because once you do your part, they have to do theirs. But then you could follow him there too. And if he gets other stuff out, you'll get little emails from Amazon which is super cool. You could do that. Follow the authors you like, and you'll get alerts when new books come out. There's no rhyme or reason to it, really, on how quickly they tell you after a launch day, but it's better late than never, as I like to say. So with that, you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, maybe the Twitters, the Spotify, the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast @gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitters, and the emails. It really does make a difference. She gets lonely. Nobody writes her to torment her, so do your part, people. You can support the show over there at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section. This is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till their hair turns brown and it pours out of their nose, people, and then we will film it. And if you want that same experience, as weird though that sounds, you can go to the Coffee Brand Coffee link in the show notes. Use the code PODCASTGRUNT. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. You support an American-made company hiring American employees. And if you're not in the continental U.S. where they mail, shop local. It really does make a difference to the economy, to the world, to the the greater well-being of everything. So that's my spiel, people. Shop local. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, Kenneth, thank you for coming on. So this was your first short story published, first anything published. Was it your first interview?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm knocking out all the first, so now it'll be easier going forward. You've got the hard part out of the way.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right. And with that, we're going to hit the end button, people. And we look forward to seeing you at the next interview. Wait for it. Wait for it.